morning, this is Ed Pozzuoli, president of Tripp Scott, and today we are honored to have the 45th governor of Wisconsin, Governor Scott Walker. Governor, welcome.
Ed, great to be with you.
Hey, tell us, most of our viewers don't know who you are and what you're about. Tell us, what do they need to know about Scott Walker?
Well, I think there's someone they would like to know is someone who fights and wins for hardworking taxpayers. A lot of people talk about fighting, a lot of people in Washington do a lot of fighting, but most of them don't win. In Wisconsin, 4 years ago, we took on the big government special interest and we won. And today, because of it, our property taxes are lower, our schools are better, our state and our local governments are better off. And we took on a big challenge. I'm the only governor ever in American history to survive a recall election, but it was worth it because the state's better.
But you took your principles and you stayed with it, and you fought through the recall that was basically generated by some of the unions in the state.
Yeah, it was one of those where early on in 2009, before the election in 10, my wife and I had thought about running for governor, and we really felt that we needed to because we were worried that our two sons, who were back in high school at the time, were going to grow up in a state that wasn't as great as the one we grew up in.
Right.
And we just thought that was something we needed to step in and do something about. So even in the height of 100,000 protesters in and around our capital, with all the death threats and the abuse and everything else we got, we knew it was worth it to sustain that for their sake and for all the other sons and daughters like them. And the good news is today, many years later, the state is better.
So you stood on principle, and that was easy.
I don't know if it was easy, but it was, something. I grew up in a small town. My dad was a small town preacher. My mom was a part-time secretary. Between my parents, my grandparents, in fact, my grandfather worked for about 40 years as a machinist, saved up every penny he had so he could retire down in Fort Myers so he could walk over and fish every day. My grandparents on my other side were farmers that didn't have indoor plumbing until my mother went to junior high. I didn't inherit a lot of fame or fortune from them, but I did get the sense that if you work hard and you play by the rules, anything is possible in America, and I've tried to make that possible for people in my state, and I want to have the same thing for people across America.
Give us your view on both the American economy and where we need to go and what we're not seeming to be accomplished so far under this president.
Yeah, I get frustrated with this president because I think his view is that Washington, putting money in Washington is how to grow the economy. You look at last year alone, a report showed that 6 of the top 10 wealthiest counties in America aren't in New York, they're not in Florida, they're not in California, they're around Washington, D.C. That should tell you a lot. That's because people like the president and Hillary Clinton and others, they believe that growing government in Washington is the way to grow the economy. I think most of us as Americans understand you grow it in cities and towns and villages all across this great country, that people create jobs, not the government, and that if we make it easier for people to create those jobs, we can grow the economy. I want to be in a place where everyone, not one group pitted against another, but where everyone in this country can live their piece of the American dream, and we've got to have a higher percentage of growth for that.
Let me switch gears. A lot of foreign issues, ISIS and the beheadings, and Benjamin Netanyahu spoke to Congress. Give us your view on foreign affairs and international issues.
Well, again, I think this is one of those where there's a huge disconnect from our current president and some that have advised him, like Hillary Clinton when she was Secretary of State. The president drew a line in the sand and then proceeded to let them walk over it. The president calls ISIS the JV squad just a year ago, Yemen a success, and Iran a place we can do business with. His former Secretary of State even gave Russia a reset button. I think in contrast, we need a commander-in-chief who's willing to stand up and define our enemy, which is radical Islamic terrorism. We need to be prepared to take the fight to them instead of waiting for the fight to come to us. And to me, the way you do that is you consult with your chain of command, both your cabinet members, national security advisor, but also the generals out in the field as well as those on the Joint Chiefs. You consult with Congress as required by the Constitution. And then you reaffirm your allies. I mean, Prime Minister Netanyahu gave, I think, a Churchill-like speech in front of the joint session of Congress. I think it's about time we affirm our true ally in Israel. We take on and support our other allies around the world, whether it be the United Kingdom, Germany, Japan, you go down the line. And then you look within that region, I think for Egypt and Jordan in particular, because of what we've seen with their citizens, as well as with others, Saudi Arabia and Turkey, there's a possibility of putting together a global coalition to weed out the virus that is radical Islamic terrorism.
And obviously you're out there at least exploring the possibility of running for president and trying to gain the Republican nomination. How do we get from where we are today to the nomination for Scott Walker?
Well, should we get in and be a good lawyer, you appreciate the qualifier that we
Yep, that's why I put it there.
That's right. Yeah, you totally appreciate it. But I think three things are needed for a Republican to win, and more importantly for this country to win going forward. I think Americans are looking for a new, fresh face. If Republicans are going to face a name from the past, I think we need a name from the future to take on that challenge. I think secondly, we need someone with big, bold ideas from outside of Washington. I think we've shown that in Wisconsin that we can take on big, bold ideas. And then I think most importantly, we need someone with the proven record of having the courage to take on the big issues. And that's part of the reason why we're looking seriously at this, because we believe we bring that to the table.
Well, Governor, I appreciate your time today, and thank you for sharing with our South Florida audience. Thank you again.
Thank you.
All right.